Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tiffany. I'm one of the careers consultants. I work in the Careers and Employability office that's based at this campus. We're in the Learning Centre. We're on the mezzanine floor, which is the floor between the ground floor and the first floor, if you haven't already been to see us. There's no need to make lots and lots of notes this afternoon because I am going to make sure that Mickey gets the slides, she puts them on WebLearn for you or circulates them to you via email. So for this session on CVs, the learning outcome is going to be, by the end of the session, you should be able to produce an effective CV and covering letter for a range of different requirements. So we can talk generally about how you can get a CV ready for your work placement or for your first graduate role, or perhaps for a part-time job that's not related to early childhood in any way. You would need to produce different kind of CVs for different kind of roles. And before I go on further, just like to say that the information that I'm going to talk about in this session is about producing a CV in the UK. If you're wanting to work overseas, CV content and style format varies from country to country. It's not always the same. But if you did want to work overseas, come and see us at the Careers Service and we can advise you a little bit about how to write a CV for that particular country. Well, we'll certainly do our best anyway. So the CV is your marketing tool, and it's often the first impression that an employer will see of you. So for that reason, it has to be very good, it has to be very positive, because I'm sure you're aware there's more and more people graduating from university than ever, and perhaps the rate of jobs hasn't increased with the rate of graduates, so it is very competitive. So for that reason, your CV does have to be very powerful. You are promoting and selling yourself to prospective employers. It's an organised summary of personal details, education, skills and experience, and ideally this should be targeted towards a specific position or company. So you need to have a think about the skills and the experience that you've got that's relevant to the job or the placement that you're applying for. It's also a chance for you to highlight your strengths and demonstrate your suitability for the job in the hope that they're going to see your CV, be impressed by it and want to invite you to interview. Contents of a CV. Go into these in a little bit more detail. So you've got your personal details, education, work experience. You might want to have a skills profile and some information about your interests. Those two are optional. And your references. So how to structure the CV? Well, at the top of the CV is your personal details. Those can't be moved anywhere. They have to stay at the top of the CV. And at the bottom of the CV, you need to have the references. In the middle, all the other information, your education, your skills, your work experience, they don't have to go in a set order. You can have a think about the most important part to place them. So what I would say to people is put sure the most relevant information appears on the first page of the CV. It's like having a shop and you put all your best products in the stock room. It's not going to work. They need to be in the front window. So if the most relevant item on your CV is your early childhood studies degree, that has got to come first on the CV. Alternatively, if you're applying for a part-time job in retailing and you've already worked in retail, that job experience in retail should come before the education because your degree is not quite as relevant in that situation. Personal details. In the UK, we don't put an awful lot of personal details on CVs. So name, address. Ideally, it's best just to put one address down. Sometimes you'll see a CV that's got a term, time and address and a home address. Best thing to do really is to have the address in the town where you're applying for the jobs or the placements. Telephone number, email address, but always one that's sensible and business-like. So Your university email address would be absolutely fine, as would be one with your name on at Hotmail or yahoo.com. In the career service, we do get to see a lot of CVs, and sometimes I can find it quite amusing if I get an email address that's bettyboop@yahoo.com or Red Lips or Ready for Work 24/7. I've seen them all, but unfortunately I don't think employers are going to be amused by it. It will look and appear to them quite unprofessional, so do be careful with that one. Likewise with your telephone answer messages on your mobile. I've picked up quite a few phones in my time and been greeted to rapping and all sorts of musical interludes on there. Again, not very businesslike, so do make sure that you've got a very clear and businesslike sounding message if you're not able to take their calls. Also, make sure your address, phone number, email address, all your contact details are up to date, because an employer will find it quite irritating if they can't get hold of you. Nationality is not something that's normally put on a British CV. If you're applying for work permit status, well, I think it's actually changed now. If you're an international graduate and you're applying to get a Tier 2 visa, you might want to put that information on, but otherwise nationality doesn't have to be there. Employers can normally figure out nationality. They'll be able to see where you went to school if they're really that bothered and which languages you speak. Date of birth, again, isn't necessary. Again, they've got a rough idea of your age from just looking at the dates on there. Gender's not needed. Photographs, not really on a British CV. I know in quite a few European countries, such as Germany and Switzerland, everyone puts a photo on their CV. UK, we don't, so what I would advise you is don't put a photo on a CV unless an employer specifically asks for it. So the education should appear in reverse chronological order, so the most recent needs to appear first. So for you, it's going to be your degree course, it's going to be your early childhood studies degree, which is the first item in the education section. The next information would be your education before university, so your A-levels, BTECs or university entrance level qualifications you took in your country if you weren't educated in the UK. But again, you need to have a think about the relevance of all of this. Perhaps if you did your A-levels not that long ago, might be useful to have them down, perhaps if some of them were relevant to your degree. However, if you took them 20 years ago and they're in totally different subjects, you kind of think, well, maybe it's not worth adding them now. So the key issue there really is relevance, and also there's no need to put a long list of every single topic you did relating to A-levels or your degree. It is useful to include some details about your modules on your degree, but you haven't got the space to list every single one on there. Otherwise the CV is going to get absolutely huge. It's going to be too long. So here's a way in which you can present your education. So you need to be quite specific and clear to an employer. So date you started, when you're likely to finish, the full title of the degree as well, so it's a BA Hons. If you put just early childhood studies, they may not realise whether it's a master's. They might think it's a master's degree, they might think it's a foundation degree. Be very clear that it's a BA that you're studying for. If you've got a rough idea of the final grade you're expecting and it's a 2-1 or a first, you can add that as well. And the name of the university, which is London Metropolitan University. As I said, not room to list every module. Like in the example, you could list about 6 of them. Or another suggestion, which I think would be quite useful, is to list just 3 or 4, but to describe a little bit about what was covered in those modules. So you're not listing many modules, you're listing the modules that are most related to the job that you're going for, or the placement. So have a think which modules are most related to this particular job or placement that I'm applying for. And sometimes just by a title, it's not always clear to an employer what was studied there. Sometimes module titles can be quite broad. So just describe very briefly, 2 or 3 sentences, what was covered there. If you're already doing your dissertation, you might want to have a think about what you're going to write about your final year project or your dissertation. So again, you need to think about skills and knowledge that are relevant to the industry or the job that you're applying for. Be positive about what you did in your research. And what I would say is only include one project or piece of work or report in the CV, because otherwise it's going to get very long as well. So perhaps it might well be that your dissertation isn't the most relevant project you've done in your degree. It might be something else you did. So have a think about the relevance. And also think about the people who are going to be reading your CV. Not all of them might be early years professionals. There might be a human resources person reading that CV. So think, am I using jargon? Would somebody without an early childhood background be able to understand that? So do bear that in mind. Think about that. If you're going to start using abbreviations, acronyms, is it going to be understandable to people who aren't from that background? So the work experience section, normally you would have that reverse chronological order again, like the education, so the most recent job that you've done first. However, if you're applying for a role that's relating to your degree course, and the most recent job you've done is in something else, it might be in retail, it might be in hospitality, what you could do is split your work experience section up into two and have a relevant experience or a early childhood experience section and another experience section. So then the employer is going to see the work you've done with young children first rather than the retail job. I mean, you will have developed skills and experiences that are useful to an employer through the retail experience, but if you've got something relevant, hit them with it first, put it pride of place, make sure it's sitting on the first page of that CV. What to include in work experience? We need the name of the company, the location, so you could just say King's Cross, London, not a full postal address. And if it's not clear from the title of the company what it is, you could put in brackets what it is. For example, there's a record label I know that's called Cherry Red. No one would have any idea what that company did, so in that case you would put in brackets a record label. Dates as well, so your start date and your finish date. Employers like to have a good idea of how long you've worked in a particular job, and also your job title. What you would also be including would be a description, a brief description of your main responsibilities, and also any achievements as well. Try and make the CV unique to you. Employers will be far more interested in something that you as an individual have achieved in that job rather than just this job description. They can pick a job description off the internet. They want to know about what you achieved in that job. So for example, if you won an award, you might have been Employee of the Month, perhaps you were given a special project to complete which you completed successfully. Alternatively, you might have had a job that was very targets orientated, perhaps you were in retail, and that role you could say you successfully met your targets. But do bear in mind, when you're talking about your work experience, do be positive about it, rather than just saying words such as I did. Perhaps you could say I achieved, I founded, I established, I successfully completed, because bear in mind it is your sales tool. Also, try and avoid a mundane list or a list of mundane duties. Yes, perhaps when you worked in retail you were tidying the shop floor. And if you are applying for another job in retail, it's fine to list that. However, if you're applying for a role in a nursery, in a primary school, the recruiters there probably don't want to know that you tidied the shop floor. Likewise, if you had a role as an admin assistant and you're applying for another role as an admin assistant, it's fine to just say you did photocopying. If you're applying for a role as an early years practitioner, no. You could describe that as office administration and what you learnt from it, which could be meeting deadlines, then it becomes more relevant for that particular role. So if your role So if your work experience is not relevant to what you're now applying for, you can still include it. Depends if you have any relevant experience, but don't think just because my job was part-time in retail, just because my job was in a call centre or I was working in a bar, don't hide it from the CV because you're worried that it's not graduate level or it's not relevant. If it's the only experience you have, you definitely need to include it because it will demonstrate to an employer that you've held down a job, you've worked in teams, you've had to communicate with other people from different backgrounds, because after all, you're going to be doing that in an early years setting as well. In fact, recruiters are probably going to be more worried if they see a CV that has no work experience at all on it. They'll be quite worried if they think all you've ever done is study. So some experience is better than none at all, definitely. If you've had several jobs that are the same, so you might have done 6 or 7 jobs in retail, for example, you can group those together because otherwise you may be repeating the same skills, the same duties every single time. And also, a way to break up the text and to make the CV more kind of employer friendly is to use bullet points rather than having lots of paragraphs. If employers see a CV that's got a lot of lengthy paragraphs, they think, oh my goodness, I'm really busy, I've got 100 of these to look through, can't be bothered with this one, I'm drowning here. So make life easier for them, use nice bullet points to break up the text. So this is a way in which you could present your work experience. So you can see there you've got the dates, you've got the job title, you've got the company and where it was. So this person isn't applying for anything in retail anymore. So rather than listing those very basic duties like tidying the floor, going to attending in the fitting rooms, he or she has actually thought, well, actually, this is what I learnt that's going to be useful in my next career. So it's thinking about the skills. We call these the transferable skills because they're transferable across all jobs, such as team working, communication, problem solving, that's another one. So you can see there, she's mentioned that she's worked flexibly, which is going to be useful. Also cooperatively as part of a team. Met the sales targets, which is a good example of an achievement there. And also won an award. So you can see examples of skills and achievements in there. It's not just a basic description of duties that aren't really that relevant anymore. So having a skills profile in your CV is actually optional. Some people may choose to talk about the skills they developed under their previous jobs, like in the Marks and Spencer's example we've just seen. Other people choose to have what's called a skills profile, and you would need to decide if you're going to have one of these, which skills you're going to include in there. So how would you go about identifying these skills that the employer is looking for? So again, you're thinking about that employer in that nursery, in that infant school, and thinking, what skills are they looking for? What skills do they require me to have? So if you have a look at a job description, that may give you some ideas. If you look at a person specification, do you all know what a person specification is? Just in case you don't, it's an employer's wish list of the skills that they're looking for. So often a bullet pointed list, it may ask for a particular qualification or a particular degree, then it will list more transferable skills like communication, team working, problem solving, working on own initiative. So you would look very closely at that and think, oh, if they've mentioned team working here, perhaps I will have that as one of the skills in my profile. Smaller companies may not have a detailed job description and person specification. They may just have a very brief job advert, could be just a few paragraphs. Look in those paragraphs, see what skills they're talking about. Might be through your knowledge of the actual job that might get you thinking, oh, what skills do I need? Well, in early years, of course, I need to be a good communicator. I need to be able to empathise with young children. I need to have leadership skills. So those, again, that's another way of thinking of the skills you could include. And also knowledge you've got of the industry as well, which is similar. So skills that could go in a profile, and what you do need to bear in mind is if you had all of those skills in a skills profile, your CV is going to get too big. That's too many. You probably need to look at perhaps about 5 or so, 4, 5, 6. So IT and languages normally appear in most profiles, but they may be towards the bottom unless IT and languages are really important for the job that you're applying for. Analytical, do you really need research skills to be an early years practitioner? Probably not, so that might be one to go. Business awareness, possibly not. You're not applying to work in the private sector. Team working, problem solving, time management, organisation, communication, yes, all of those would be useful. So what you would do, so you've got those skills headings, you've picked them up. It's not enough just to say, I've got good communication skills, because that could mean absolutely anything. And it's also going to put a massive question mark into the employer's head. They're going to think, okay, you say you've got good communication skills, but I need some proof. I need some evidence that you've got good communication skills. I need you to tell me where you developed those skills. So what you can do is give examples in your profile of where you've developed those skills. And those examples can come from anywhere in your life. You could talk about giving presentations at university. That's a good example of communication skills. Could be dealing with lots of different customers when you've worked in retail. It could be when you had a position of responsibility in a student society. I mean, if you've got relevant examples from early years settings, you can include those, but the examples don't have to be relevant ones. So if you look on the overhead here, this is how somebody's tackled communication skills. So you've got good communication skills, oral and written, gained from delivering presentations at university, but also by writing reports, assignments as well. Communication skills when dealing with customers in 2 retail roles, IKEA and Debenhams. So you get the idea. You mentioned the skill, spoken communication, written communication, but you mentioned very clearly where you developed it, whether it's university or the company. Give names of companies. It does illustrate the examples better for the employer. So interests and achievements. Before you include this section, and it's always interests and achievements, never hobbies, not a word to use for a CV. You need to have a think about the value of this kind of section. How worthwhile would it be? What are you trying to tell an employer when you've got an interest section? Because if you just have a list of interests, such as going to the cinema, watching the TV, playing football, swimming, it doesn't really mean much to an employer. So what you need to do is have a think about that activity. Is it going to show to an employer any skills, or if you learnt anything from it? I would guess watching the TV, you wouldn't learn a lot from that. It's quite passive. Playing in the football team, yes, if you did that, because it demonstrates straight away that you develop team working skills, possibly leadership skills if you were the captain. So you need to elaborate a little bit. You could say you were in the university football team or in a local football league, and then you would say you developed team working skills. Likewise, if you've been a member of any clubs or societies at university, perhaps you've been one of the course reps, you've been a star, that's something really useful to include. If you've done any volunteering in the community, or you've been involved with any religious organisations, or involved with any sporting clubs outside university, include those. Music as well. If you've been in a band or an orchestra or a choir, it's team working, performance, presentation skills. Even some kind of sporting activity you do on your own, such as swimming or going to the gym. If you explain how many times you do that a week, you could say to that employer, this demonstrates your motivation and commitment. So you're motivated and committed to do that, so you also would be at work. Also, if you've got any interests that are related to the kind of work you're looking for, it's important to focus on those as well. So references are, in the UK, are often used only in the final stages of selection. So after they've interviewed you, they're really keen on offering you the job. That's normally the time when they would take up references. It's not normal in the UK to have a standard reference letter that you send off with your application. I know in other countries this happens. What you can do with your CV is you can provide the contact details of your referees, but you would need their name, their job title, and where they work at the very least, and one way of communicating with them, of contacting them, whether it be a postal address, a telephone number, and an email address. Ideally all three if you've got the space in the CV to do that. But if you just write Sarah at Sainsbury's, it's not an awful lot of help to an employer. They need the person's full name, they need a job title, and they need the name of the branch and a way of contacting them. Usually you would provide 2 referees. One is going to be an academic one, so have a think about a lecturer here at the university that knows you well. A lot of students have their personal academic advisor as that first referee. If you don't know that personal academic tutor, if you don't know that person very well, have a think about another lecturer who does know you well. Second referee would usually be a previous employer. So if you've done any work that's related to early childhood settings, early years settings, try and ask a person from that experience to be your referee. If not, an employer in a different setting would be fine. If you haven't worked before, think about getting 2 academic referees from the university. And also, if you're going to approach somebody, if you're going to have somebody as a referee, do make sure that you contact them first. Send them an email, send them your CV, so just out of courtesy, so they're not going to be shocked or surprised when they start getting emails or phone calls saying, can you please provide a reference for this person? And also if you send them a CV, it gives them an idea, a better idea about your experience, about your skills, so that'll help them to make a better reference, produce a better reference for you. One thing to bear in mind with referees, never have family members as referees because they're not going to say anything bad about you, so they're a definite no-no. If your CV is getting quite long and you feel that it's going to tip onto 3 pages, you can just write at the bottom of your CV, references available on request. That is acceptable. And also it's worth having a think when you're getting your CV ready. What's more important to an employer? Is it having every single contact detail for that employer? Does take up space. Or is it better to give them more information about your skills and your experience? And it's probably going to be the latter. So CV presentation, 2 pages of A4 maximum, that is the standard length for a British CV. Any longer and it's going to put employers off. They're busy people. They don't have the time to read anything longer than 2 pages. One page is okay, and some organisations such as banks, I'm guessing you guys aren't applying to any banks, like 1 pages, but a 2-pager I think gives you more chance for you to sell yourself and your skills a little bit more. You should be consistent with the font that you use and also the size. Again, this is thinking about the employer, what's going to be easy for them to read, what's going to be clear for them to read, because if they find a CV that's full of big paragraphs and it's got 12 font 1 minute and then it jumps to 10 and then it goes back to 12 and 1 minute it's in Times New Roman and next minute it's in Arial, it's all going to be a bit of a nightmare for them. So don't try and upset them. Correct spelling and grammar, that goes without saying. Employers are getting more and more CVs for individual posts. It is a competitive world out there, and if they find a CV that's littered with spelling and grammatical errors, they are likely to reject it straight away. Even if the content is good, even if you've got good experience on there, they're still likely to reject it. It's a way of weeding out candidates if they have a lot of candidates. It also might say to them, well, this person couldn't be bothered to proofread, it's a bit slapdash. So do proofread your CV many times, make sure it is absolutely spot on. Yes, you can use a spell check, but set it to UK English because the US English spellings are different. And also spell check, it is clever, but it's not that clever. If you use a word that is correct grammatically or spelt correctly, but you've used it in the wrong context, so you used where instead of were, it won't pick it up. And do make sure that the language you use in there is correct, that it's a proper business style, professional type of English. So don't use things like couldn't or shouldn't, it should be should not or did not if you're using those. Don't use slang that you would use with your friends. Talk about children rather than kids. It is a written document. But on the other hand, don't go using over formal language as well. Hereby, whereby, you're not law students. It's not a legal document, it's just a business document. So somewhere in between those two. Do get a second opinion as well. You can go along to the careers service and we can have a look at it for you. If you know anyone who works in recruitment consultants, human resources people and managers who see CVs, by all means ask them. But be very wary about giving it to friends. I come across so many students who say, my friend says this, my friend says that. Your friend might be barking up the wrong tree completely, so be careful. Just want to show you a couple of sample CVs. It's this document here called CVs and Covering Letters. And there are two sample CVs in there. There's one which is chronological, which is probably the style that you're most familiar with. So this one has the education first because it's the most relevant item for that person. They don't have relevant work experiences yet. So there you've got the degree, quite a lot of information about the modules studied, what they learned, what was covered. Going down, you've got the work experience, 2 jobs there. Because they're not directly relevant to what this person's now applying for, she's thought about the skills she's picked up, so you can see that she's identified skills and achievements. This one has got the references in full. Moving along, we've got a skills CV, which might be another way of presenting your information. It's also a correct way of doing it. Employers will accept and recognise it. Useful if you've got a lot of work experience but that's not that relevant, so that person who's got 6 jobs in retail, or perhaps a mature student who's had a career in a different field before they came to university. This one's got a short profile. Profiles are optional and you need to keep them short and targeted towards the job if you have one. This one has got the education first, which I suppose you could do if you're applying for something related to your degree. Then you go into the skills profile. I would say the IT one's at the top here because this is an IT graduate. For most people it would probably be lower down. But you get the idea, there's bullet points and there's examples of where the person developed skills. Work experience section is quite short. They've talked about the skills that they've developed in the skills section. They don't want to repeat it in work experience. Otherwise, also the CV is going to get far too long. So bullet points in work experience are going to be minimal. They're going to focus on something different that's not been mentioned in skills. So there you are, that's 2 different types of CVs. So covering letters. Covering letters generally accompany CVs. I would say about 90% of circumstances, when you send a CV, a covering letter is going to go with it. Really helps the employer. It clarifies to them why you're contacting them. If a CV just appears in their inbox, sometimes they're going to have no idea. They'll want to know what job it is you're applying for. They may be advertising several vacancies. Also, they might not know. You might be contacting them speculatively because you want to get experience, so they're not advertising at all. And it might not be clear always what the vacancy is or the type of experience you're wanting. So out of courtesy, it will clarify that for an employer. It's there really to highlight your key skills and your suitability for the job, but in a clear and concise way. It's not going to be very long. And it's there really to help you expand upon the main points that you made in your CV. It's not there for you to repeat the same information twice. After all, what would be the point of that? No employer wants to see the same information twice. So your opening paragraph then, you need to get straight to the point and tell them why you're writing to them. So if it's an advertised vacancy, you would say, I'm writing to apply for the whatever it is vacancy, which I saw advertised in whatever it may be, TES, Nursery World, University Job Shop. And then you could say, I'm studying for my BA in early childhood studies, or I've just completed. So vacancy, where advertised, what you're doing. If you're contacting these people speculatively, so there's no vacancy as such, you would start it by saying, currently studying for my BA Hons in early childhood studies, writing to inquire if you have any work experience opportunities in your organisation. I am particularly interested in doing, and try and be as detailed as you can about the kind of experience that you want to do in that nursery or in that school. So in the middle of the covering letter, first of all, you need to explain to them why you're interested in that particular nursery, in that particular school, in that particular charity. Try and make this employer feel special. If you say to them very vaguely, you want to work there because they offer good training, they're going to think, okay, you can say that about any company, it's not specific to them. And they can tell that it's probably the same old standard covering letter that has been sent off to perhaps 99 other companies. And an employer will think, oh, they don't really want to work with me. They're writing to all these other companies. I really don't feel valued or feel special here. However, if you spend a little bit more time researching that organisation, finding out a bit more about what they actually do, if they specialise in anything, and you're able to explain to them that you want to work for that nursery because of what they do, or that school because they've got a specialism in something that appeals to you, the employer will think straight away, this person has actually taken the time to research and find out and understand what we do, and they will feel valued. It will demonstrate to them that you have a genuine interest in the organisation. And also you would need to explain to them why you're interested in the role. So why, if you want to be a teaching assistant, or why a nursery assistant, why nursery supervisor. So rather than saying you want experience, the employer will know that there's no need to actually sort of admit you don't have much experience, but say why you enjoy working with young children in an early years setting. So keep it a bit more general. So yes, my advice to you is a different covering letter each time you apply to an organisation. It's going to take more time, but it's the old saying about quality over quantity. You're going to be putting in fewer applications, but you're more likely to be successful if you're making that effort to find out about what they do. So why the job, why the company or organisation? Then you need to tell them about what you can offer. So if you've got some relevant work experience, the next thing you need to do is to highlight that. So you could say, as you can see from my attached CV, I have 2 years, 6 months, whatever it is, relevant experience, and then you can expand upon what you've already told them in the CV. If you don't have relevant experience, don't worry about it, move on. And then the next thing you need to talk about is those transferable skills that we mentioned earlier on. Give examples of the transferable skills. that are listed in their person specification or their job advert. So basically what you're doing is you're matching their skills requirements. So if that person specification mentions working on your own initiative, in your covering letter, and also CV, you need to give examples of when you worked on your own initiative. You don't have a lot of space to do it in one paragraph in a covering letter, but it is demonstrating there to an employer, yes, I've got all the skills that you want, and I'm giving you some examples, so you're matching their requirements. If it's a speculative application, or even if they haven't mentioned many skills in the job advert, this is where you need to have a think, ooh, what skills do I need for this job? I'll give examples of those. So for an early years teacher, for example, what skills do you need? Patience, which is more of a quality, but it's still important to have. Communication, of course, empathy with young children, communication, working under pressure. There's another one I thought as well, leadership. All of those straight away you could give examples of. And the Prospects website, which I can introduce to you if we've got a bit of time, has job descriptions on there. And there is one for early years teacher. If you go to that and look under entry requirements, at the bottom it will give a list, as well as academic requirements, it will talk about those skills that are needed. So that could help with that. So in your closing paragraph, this is so your letter rounds off nicely. It doesn't just stop abruptly. You need to really restate your interest in the job and to end on a bright and positive note. So here you could say something along the lines of, if you require further information, I'll be happy to supply it. You could say that you're available for interview at any time or any day apart from 1 or 2. If you're quite restricted with availability, it's going to put them off. And then you could end with something such as, I look forward to hearing from you. So this is a sample of a covering letter, and yes, it's a business letter, so it needs to look like a letter. On the right, you need to have your contact details and the date. Well, it doesn't matter, the date can go right or left as long as it's there, but you also need the contact details for the organisation. Even if they've only given you an email address, Google them. Most of them have got a website, you can find their address quite easily. Ideally, it needs to go off to a named person when you're applying. This is particularly important if you're contacting them speculatively, because if it just goes to Dear Nursery Manager, it's not likely to get read or taken seriously. So call these companies up, find out the name of the best person to send your CV and covering letter to. If it's an advertised vacancy and they say send to Human Resources, just do it. But you would address the letter to Dear Sir, Madam in that case, and end the letter yours faithfully. Yours sincerely if it's going to a named person. So presentation, yes, follow the same rules for the CV. Be consistent with your font size and style. Grammar and spelling should be spot on too. Quite often this is the first document that an employer is going to read. So for that reason, even more so that the spelling and grammar have to be perfect. No longer than 1 page of A4. They're busy, they haven't got time to read your life story. 4 or 5 paragraphs at 1 page, that's about the right length. Any longer, they're not going to read it. Any shorter, and you may not be selling yourself enough. If your covering letter is 1 paragraph long, it's probably not doing you many favours. If you're going to apply via email, what I would suggest is sending the CV and the covering letter as 2 separate Word attachments. It's easier for an employer to read the covering letter if it's as an attachment rather than the main body of the email. Stops them scrolling up and down. You would need to write something in the main body of your email, of course. So you could say, Dear, whatever their name is, please find attached my CV and covering letter for the above position, and you will have had that in as your email title, yours sincerely. If you're contacting them speculatively, probably cut and paste that first paragraph. So explain who you are, that you're looking for work experience, and then add, I have attached my CV and covering letter. Resources that are going to be useful to you. Prospect's website is very useful, very general graduate and undergraduate careers website. There are sections on there about applications, interviews, also CV advice and covering letters. Target Jobs is similar to Prospect. It has some good sample CVs and covering letters on there. Careers information sheet I've already shown you, that's the long link. And also at the Careers Service we do keep information on jobs, careers, employers. We have literature, booklets about general graduate employment. We have the Prospects Directory, probably more useful for people who want to go into a more business and commerce type career. But we have a lot of information that's online that we can direct you to. We're updating our website all the time with different information. So that's just some information about the Careers Service and how we can help. So we have quick careers queries. These run Monday to Friday between 12 and 3. That's in term time. These are for 20 minutes. So ideal if you want to bring your CV and your covering letter along for feedback, but also application forms, general interview queries, advice on your job search. To book one of those appointments, you just need to call our main switchboards. I'll give you the numbers in a second. From 9 o'clock on the day you want the appointment. Careers guidance interviews, those are longer, 30 minutes. Bookable in advance, you can email an individual careers consultant or call our main switchboard. Ideal if you want guidance interview, so you have no idea what you want to do next. Also for a mock interview as well, which is something else we offer. Got a job interview coming up, send us the full details about the job and your CV, covering letter or application form in advance, then we can put together suitable interview questions. So our general email address. We do run a whole load of workshops similar to this one on areas such as job search, application forms, interview skills, but these are very general workshops. You're likely to be sat in a room with somebody studying maths or accounting or law. We run these workshops every semester, and if you look at our events page you can see the details and you can book up because you don't want to miss out. Just want to draw your attention finally to the job shop. If you're looking for work, graduate jobs, placements, haven't yet signed up, two parts of the job shop. We've got the Jobs Online, which is an online jobs board as the title might suggest. You can look for work placements, graduate roles on there, also part-time work in companies external to the university. The Met Temps Recruitment Agency is an agency. It acts a bit like Reed or Adecco, but it is just for London Met students. This advertise is paid jobs in the university itself and placements. And also through Met Temps we advertise voluntary opportunities with charities. Something you might be interested in doing if you want to get more experience working with young children. There may be opportunities through volunteering there. So those are our contact details. Got the two offices. As I said before, North Campus Holloway, it's in the Learning Centre. Our reception desk is directly above the Costa Coffee. You can also use our city office as well, which is on the ground floor of Calcutta House, accessible via their library. Okay, so that's all I've got to say on CVs. I've just got a booklet about the Careers Service which I can circulate round. It's got some information on there just to summarise what we do. Our web address is on there. We're also on Facebook and Twitter as well, so you can like us and follow us, then you'll get more details about our events and our jobs that way.